All right. Today, we're going to cover the most fundamental thing in writing. We're going to cover scenes and beats. All right. So, ready? Here we go. Scenes are the building block of story. You cannot get, I don't care what you're writing, I don't care how you're publishing, you can't get where you're going to go without understanding that you need scenes. This sounds very obvious, but if you take a look at newer or inexperienced writers, you will see a lack of the structure we're about to talk about. And you need that structure because it just makes better sense. Now, I know some of the people here have experience with this, so I'm not like talking directly to you. I'm aiming kind of at the newer people for a moment, but you know, it'll be fine. We're just covering some ground before we get moving forward. Scenes are made of beats. You've probably, if you've hung out with me, you've heard me talk about beats, but beats are portions of scenes. They are percentages of scenes. You can have a scene that is 100% just one beat. You can have a scene that is, 27.216% this beat plus some more beat over there. It doesn't matter. Scenes are made of beats. And if you can understand that there are 5 kinds of beats and that they all sort of work together to help, convey information in a scene or in a chapter or in an act or over here with your story or whatever, in the same way that our lovely shark graphic, because we're going to use Jaws for our examples today. So in the same way that like the letter R is part of the word and the graphic shark, you can think that beats are part of the scene that does a thing in your story. Now, there are 5 kinds of beats you need to know about. There are technically more than 5 kinds, but if you learn the first 5, the other ones are all sort of versions of these 5. 5 types: action, dialogue, discovery, investigation, and emotional. The order doesn't really matter. You can flip them around however you want, but this is the order that's the easiest to teach. And some of these are exactly what it says on the label. For instance, an action beat is somebody doing something. Like the shark is eating Quint, or Quint is being eaten by the shark. Action, something happens. It is generally somebody doing something or something happening to someone. You want to try and aim more for the doing, the active, rather than the passive of having something happen to somebody. Generally, the easiest thing you're going to think of when you think about action beats is the climax of your story, because that's the big action scene in the movie. That's the big moment. But anytime a character's doing something, you can make a good case that that's something, even if it's 2 sentences where they, walk out of the bathroom and walk into the office. That's an action beat. It doesn't need to look a certain way. It just needs to be in action. Now, the downside of thinking that is that every verb turns into an action beat, which just gets a little tedious. So we try to steer away from overthinking. And you want to think about it more in terms of not just this sentence has this verb, so it's this beat, but these sentences work together collectively. Like the shark eating Quint. It's in the book, it's 5 sentences. In the movie, it's like 40-something seconds. Examples of an action beat. The beginning of the movie, Chief Brody goes to the office. The shark eats somebody. Hooper goes in the water. Quint smashes the radio, and Brody blows up the shark. Spoilers for Jaws. Action beats are where something happens. And generally, we use a term called substantial, where something substantial happens. That way you can, sort of differentiate between John blinks as an action beat versus, John gets chased off Devil's Mountain by the ghost. Action beat. With me so far? Action beat's one of the easy beats. The other easy beat, dialogue beat, which is people talking. It says it on the name. And a dialogue beat is somebody talking. And ideally, this is conversation between 2 people or more. it's not technically a dialogue beat if the character is alone by themselves talking to themselves. It is and it isn't. There's a different name for it. You don't need to know that right now. That's a monologue beat, but fundamentally, dialogue is talking. Now, two important points. Dialogue is reaction. Dialogue is reactive. And dialogue is not where plot lives. Here's what I mean. So, you person listening to this are hearing me talk, and you're thinking something. I don't know if you're thinking about writing. I don't know if you're thinking about the stuff you have to do later, or if you're thinking about the holiday that's coming, or if you're thinking about, like, I don't know, whatever the shit it is you're thinking about. When I say something like, hey, dialogue is not where plot lives, and you hear that and go, I don't understand what that means. Your thought of, I don't understand, is a reaction to me saying a thing. 99% of dialogue is a reaction to either what's going on in the moment or a reaction to what's been happening up to that moment. And it's a response. It's an outlet for character feelings and character experience more than it is an informational, vehicle. You don't want character A turning to character B and saying, okay, here's the plot. We have to go do this and we have to go do that and we have to do this before the time runs out. Because that's the plot of the story. Because if two characters are engaged in doing the plot and they know what they're doing, it does not need to be said to them, because ultimately what you're doing is not talking to the characters or having the characters talk to each other. You're talking to the reader, which you, I don't know if you know this, should never do. It makes you sound like an amateur. It's poor form. There are better ways to do this. So if you stop trying to recap your plot in dialogue, it forces you to have to explain the plot in exposition, which is honestly better storytelling and better craft. Dialogue is not for plot. Dialogue is for reaction. The example I give for this is if two people are talking and something blows up in the background, most likely one of these characters is going to turn to the other and go, holy shit, did you just see the thing blow up? Because dialogue is a reaction. Is this the fourth wall if you're talking to the reader? It can be the fourth wall if you're talking directly to the reader. But there's a difference between saying, hey, reader, this is the text and this is the sentence in the book that you are reading as though you are being directly addressed. That's the fourth wall. Versus me writing a thing that is of no benefit to the narrative and is only there to explain what is already known to the characters, but I'm explaining it to the reader because I think the reader is an idiot. So I'm spoon-feeding them this story. A lot like the Superman trailer, which just spoon-feeds us some things because it glosses over other things because it missed the point of Superman. You don't want to spoon-feed your reader. Trust your reader to be smart. Trust your reader to have read more things than your work. And they know how things work. They know how, plots and twists and movement go. So they can at least, be engaged by the story. Dialogue is for talking and reacting. If you can nail that, and then remember that dialogue should sound like people communicating to each other, your dialogue will immediately improve. Whether you're writing a fantasy novel in, the most archaic language, or whether you are writing the most modern romance or the grimmest, darkest cyberpunk. Make your dialogue sound like people, and make sure your dialogue is a reaction to what's happening, and you'll be just fine. On we go. Examples of dialogue. All of these are conversations. The mayor talks to Brody about it's the 4th of July weekend. Ellen talks to Hooper because in the book they hook up. Quit talks to anybody, anytime. Dialogue. Famous scenes, the Scar comparison scene, that's some bad hat, Harry. Dialogue beats are how somebody feels in the moment and how they express that feeling. So, you, the author, need to be aware of what a character is thinking and feeling. How do they feel in this moment? Whatever it might be. This event in the story just happened. How do they feel? Figure it out, and then make sure the dialogue reflects that. They're excited. Okay, when you're excited, how do you sound? Oh, they're terrified. How do you sound when you're scared? Take that and mirror it in your character. It will make an immediate improvement in how you're writing. You don't need to think about it in terms of, well, my character's being chased by a dragon. I've never been chased by a dragon. I don't know what to do. It doesn't matter if it's been chased by a dragon. It matters, have you ever been chased? Have you ever been afraid for your life? Have you ever had any fear of that level? Find one. Mirror it. Get there. Sit there emotionally. And then put it in the character's face. On we go. Here's where we start adding layers and nuance and fiddly bits. A discovery beat is where a character finds information without looking for it exactly. They didn't know they were looking for it. It just sort of happens. Oh shit, I've discovered the body in the murder mystery. Or in the case of Jaws, oh God, that's how big the shark is. I've never seen the shark before. Now I have discovered this piece of information. A discovery beat, the critical definition is when you find something out without intending to. Like, I didn't realize that the window was open all night long. And that must be how the vampire got in. The degree of unintentionality, how much did they not mean to do this thing, is real flexible. Because it comes down to like understanding the different shades and gradations of I intended to do a thing versus I did not intend to do a thing. Like tripping over the body in a dark room and wondering, oh my God, what is that? Is totally different because you went into the room with a particular goal versus somebody casually saying, oh yeah, you have a twin brother, obviously, over there. You didn't know? And thinking about how the character is going to react to a discovery matters because discovery beats almost always raise the stakes in story because it's new information. And new information always challenges the existing status quo. Always. Always, always, always. It might not be a big significant challenge, but it is a challenge. On we go. So examples of discovery beats. People seeing how big the shark is. There's a moment where Ellen Brody is looking at a book and realizing, oh God, sharks are dangerous. We'll talk about this more later, but the mayor realizes just how bad things are when kids get eaten on the beach. There's also a jump scare in Jaws where they're underwater looking around at like the wreck of a boat, and there's like a head that just kind of floats out from, behind something. Discovery beats add new information, and usually when they add that new information, they create consequences and complications. It's great to fuck around. It's terrible to find out. That's the discovery beat. That's the find out stage. We will talk more about fucking around and finding out when we talk more about scene construction. But for now, discovery beats are the unintentional discoveries. Oh, I didn't know this. Now I have to add this to the context or keep this in my mind as well as the 5 other things. Discoveries create lifted stakes. An easier one, a more proactive one, is the investigation beat. And that's where a character is looking for and finds the information they're looking for. And that can be something as simple as like Googling something, or researching in the library, or consulting the old wizard who lives in the tower, or watching a video on YouTube, whatever it might be. The investigation is intentional and active. It's where somebody's doing something to go try and get specific answers to a question or to a series of questions. Somebody wants to know something and they're doing something about it. The key part is the doing something about it. Because if you just say, gosh, I'd like to know whatever it is, fill in the blank, and then the character doesn't do anything about it, you've just stalled all the momentum in your scene. You've stalled all the beat because it just sort of sits there. It's about the doing. It's proactive. Discovery beats were unintentional. Investigation beats are intentional. So examples, really obvious ones in Jaws. There's an autopsy when they look and see just how bad the shark has been gnawing on people. Then later on, when a shark is caught and everybody thinks, oh good, the shark's been caught. They examine the shark and discover that it is in fact not the correct shark, but they investigate this. And then later on in the movie, because not all investigations need to be autopsies or info dump scenes, though that is okay to do. Investigation is the pursuit of anybody trying to gain knowledge. I think I can reel this fish in, says Quint. So he sits in the big chair and he grabs his fishing pole and he tries to hook the shark and bring him in. Investigation doesn't have to look like any one thing. It's just somebody seeking knowledge and doing something about it. It isn't limited to info dump, though the most common example is an info dump, and that's fine. But don't think it's only that. An emotional beat, our fifth kind of beat, is where a character feels feelings. Any character. All the characters. Whatever character. Feeling feelings. And those feelings may or may not be expressed to other people, but they are at least felt and contextualized for the reader. When it is felt but not expressed to other characters, we call that an internal, as in like inner thought. Amateur writing would italicize that. Whereas if I feel a feeling and I express it verbally out loud, that's dialogue. But if I express it through body language, like if I get angry and I start throwing things around the room or whatever, I'm still expressing my feeling, but it's not a dialogue beat anymore. Now it's an action and emotional beat. But the emotional beats function, no matter what emotion it is, positive, negative, anywhere in between, is to humanize the character, help the reader connect to the character by seeing that the character's emotional palette is not that dissimilar or disconnected from the reader's emotional palette. Oh, that character's feeling things based on their situation. I, a human on Earth reading this book, also feel things relative to my situation. Cool, I'm building a bridge between this made-up person and me. They feel a little bit more real to me. And because they feel a little bit more real to me, I understand why they're doing the thing they're doing, even if I wouldn't do it that way myself. But I get it. Again, building a bridge between the reader and a made-up person. The emotional beat humanizes and develops context. It adds depth. Emotional beat examples. At the start of the movie, Brody and his wife are laying in bed together, trying to figure out how the hell they're going to have what they think is a pretty calm day before the shark starts eating everybody. The end of the movie, Hooper and Brody are swimming back to shore. There's a moment of levity and relief that, oh, hey, the shark's dead. We won. Yippee. Or Quint gets really frustrated when Brody grabs the radio and tries to call for help because Quint is obsessed in his hunt for the shark. So Quint smashes the radio. Find an emotion that your character is feeling. Narrow it down, boil it down, distill it. And you will see that this emotion you have the character feeling should be adding context and depth. Nobody feels things just so that you could write the word in a sentence. It has to do something for the story. And you want to think two questions. How do they feel, they being the character? How does the character feel in this moment? And why do they feel that in this moment? One of the better ways to substantially improve your writing very, very quickly is to think about things in terms of emotional expression. Now, if you are a human who has difficulty with emotional expression, either putting it into words and verbalizing it or expressing it in text or making sure you've plugged the right emotional peg into the right emotional hole, this is going to be a challenge for you. But it is a challenge that is doable. You just need to practice, and you need to be willing to be wrong a lot until you get better at it. Emotional beats add depth. They're difficult. On some surface level, they're very easy because you just say, oh, this person feels this. But when you dig into it and you try to do more with it, it has to be more than superficial. On we go. So that's beats. Beats are parts of scenes. We like that. So now, when we think about scenes, we want to think, again, two questions. What kind of scene is this? What am I writing? And what's happening here? What's going on in the scene? What's the point of this scene? And some of the things people are writing aren't really scenes because they're just going to be paragraphs. Oh, Kevin walks into the other room. That's not a scene. That's just Kevin moving. Where Kevin's going is going to be the next scene. Not every action is a scene. Sometimes actions are part of a greater picture of scenes. But if you ask yourself, what kind of scene is this? What's going on here? It's a better framework for figuring out where you're at in your story and what you're going to do than trying to, like, just write what sounds coolest, because that's not the point. You're trying to craft a story to get somebody engaged. So what kind of scene is this and what's happening here will steer us where it is we need to go. Now, we're going to start tying our pieces together. As I said, scenes can have any number of beats. Sometimes they're just going to be one beat. Sometimes they're going to be two or more beats. If you're about to ask me if there is a ceiling, not really. It depends on how long you're writing the thing. I mean, the scene can be huge. There's not really a ceiling. Most like just general practice, somewhere between 1 and 3 beats per scene is a nice, safe, just kind of average, just doing the thing. If you want to think about this in a more practical construction way, your manuscript is your story, right? Your MS. Your story is composed in acts, 3, 5, or 7 being the most common. 3 is the most common totally. And those acts from your story are made of chapters. You're used to writing chapters. Chapters are made of scenes. Sometimes one chapter is a single scene. Sometimes chapters are multiple scenes. But those scenes aren't just like single units of instance. They're not just like, oh, this is the 5 pages it took me to write that somebody went grocery shopping. Scenes are made of beats. We can decompose this further. We can deconstruct this. Scenes are made of beats because that scene of just, the chapter 8 where the character goes to the grocery store and then has a profound emotional breakdown when they realize that the rutabagas are no longer on sale. Well, the shock of that moment, whatever it might be, isn't just the only thing happening in this chapter. It's the emotional beat of the moment. And then their breakdown and frustration and their rage at the grocery store that, kicks the story into gear, those are beats. They're parts of scenes. But we can break it down even further because beats are made of sentences. And sentences are made of words. Every part of story construction can get broken down to a smaller thing. Even words can get broken down further into their phonemes and their letter shapes or their forms. And beyond that, they're abstract, they're ideas. So everything can get busted down. But the point of a beat is to stop thinking about a scene as a frozen diorama and start thinking about it as more of like a stop motion animation. It's a set of actions up to a point, and then a different beat takes over to finish and complete the scene. Now, sometimes that's just one beat, so the whole thing goes and then we're done. Other times it's bits and pieces. But it's about compositing a little bit of this and a little bit of that and thinking beyond just this level of, character does this. Great. Make that more specific. Most of the time, people, when they hear that, start thinking about, well, they put their left foot in front of their right foot, and they put their left hand on the thing and their right hand on the wheel. And that's not at all where you want your focus to be. This is not about getting more rigid to tell story. This is about getting more emotional and vulnerable to practice story, because a beat is a piece of architecture. It's a way of understanding and getting the message of your thing across. This is not a didactic exercise where we are just trying to, mechanize story. We are trying to feel and interpret and convey. So we think about our scenes as, compositions. It's an action. It's got a little bit of action. It's got a little bit of a dialogue and a little bit of investigation. It's got a little emotion and a little action in it. It's got all dialogue. It's got dialogue and a little emotion because the guy gets frustrated. It's got all discovery and no dialogue because it's a silent scene. Whatever it is. Think about things in their pieces that allow you to convey to the reader the pieces of information that you want. So, how do we do this? Step number 1. You're going to need to number and label your scenes. Now, I'm not saying in your manuscript, this is like, prep work. This would be where your outline is. This is your story Bible. This is your big notepad that you keep next to the computer. This is just that, weird pile of shit you keep in your head. I'm now challenging you to codify it and write it down. If you want to go from wherever you're at to the promised land of improved writing, you got to start taking notes and you got to start mapping stuff out. And step number 1 is numbering and labeling your scenes. Scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, scene 5, scene 50, scene 70, scene 90, whatever. And you want to do it in terms of scenes, not chapters, not episodes, because you can have more than one scene at a time. You can have, chapter 5 can be 3 scenes because there's a lot happening. Who knows? Think about it in terms of scenes. So in Jaws, our opening for Jaws is a girl goes swimming and she gets eaten by a shark. And there's a title sequence, which is not a scene, it's just a thing. And then Brody and his wife wake up at home. And then after that scene, once the kids go in and we sort of meet the whole family and realize, like, okay, this is what's up, Brody goes to work. Scene 3. Number and label your scenes. Not difficult, not hard. The tricky part, you're going to want to do this from beginning to end, even if you haven't written it yet. Map the whole thing in advance. Know the entire territory. The particulars are still going to, you're still going to have to sit down and figure that out on your own. But map out the whole big picture. If you've never done that before, congratulations, you're going to learn. Step number 2. Now that we've identified what number scene it is and we've labeled it, this is the scene where this happens, now we need to list who's in the scene, because every scene contains characters and every scene has a location where these things happen. So we add more information. We're giving shape to this previously nebulous idea. So scene 4 in Jaws is where Brody investigates the shark attack. So who's in this scene? Brody's there because he's doing the investigating. The deputy is there because that's who called Brody in. And there's a kid who didn't get laid. He's the guy who's supposed to be, hooking up with the girl who got eaten by the shark. So the 3 of them are there. The scene takes place on the beach. And we just write it down somewhere. Normally I teach this on note cards, but there's no reason why you couldn't do this in a spreadsheet or why you couldn't do this in a bunch of columns on a legal pad or whatever. It's just straightforward. Who's in the scene and where does it take place? Nothing very difficult. I'm not asking you to do anything complicated. Just make some decisions, because writing is the act of making decisions. Just make some straightforward decisions and write it down. And if you find out, oh shit, I need to move this around, well, then you move it around later. You're not carving it in stone. You're just getting it out of your head. On we go. So step 3. Now we're going to get a little crunchier. If you have a character in a scene, I don't care who it is, every character has a goal. If they don't have a goal, they don't need to be in the scene. You need to think about what that goal is. What are they doing here? Here is this actor upon your stage. What the shit are they doing? So we look at scene 4. We're investigating the shark attack. Brody, the deputy, and the kid who didn't get laid. They're on the beach. Who has goals? Brody wants to figure out what happened and what he's going to do about it. That's a big goal. The deputy's job is just to be amazed that a shark ate somebody. Because the entire time the deputy's just, wow, this is so bad. So the deputy's goal is to be amazed. And the kid's got a goal of continuing to not get laid because his girlfriend got eaten by a shark. So pretty straightforward goal on everybody's part, but everybody's got a goal. We don't have extra people in this. We don't have background people. If we did, they would have a goal. It would probably be something real broad, like random lady jogging just needs to jog from left to right across the screen, or background people just talk to their friends. Everybody's got a goal. Again, we're bringing structure. These are our goals for them, not the ones they would set. Yes, this is the goal they have in this scene. So Brody in this scene wants to investigate the shark attack. The deputy just wants to constantly talk about, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. And the kid really wants to sound like he's got game when in fact he has none, because Brody calls him out in the first like 2 sentences. Every character has a goal. This is not a goal that like long term, I want my character to grow 5 feet and shoot lightning bolts. This isn't a broad goal like that. It's a scene limited goal. So we're just here in this moment. We're just here right now. What's their goal right here? Later, Brody will have a goal of, I got to kill the shark. I got to swim home. I got to, do X, Y, and Z. But our goals here are just scene goals. What are we doing here right now? It's a good question. On we go. Now, you could stop at step 3 and your writing would improve because it would be organized and structurally sound. And you could do okay. You could do totally fine. But I want to take you further than that because the water is much deeper and there's much more stuff we could cover. So now we're going to figure out with the goals how hard or easy the character thinks it's going to be to do that goal. The character operates from a position of limited information, so there's kind of a guess, a perception of how hard or easy they think it's going to be to do the thing they want to do. We call that perception an emotional temperature. This is their estimation of how hard or easy a thing is. We rank this on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, it's no big deal. A 1 in like human existence would be like, oh, I've dropped a pen on the floor, or I have to yawn now. Whereas a 10 is, oh my God, holy shit, the planet is coming to an end. Right in this second, everything is the worst ever. You will very rarely, if ever, get a 10 outside of the climax. 10s are once in a book kind of things, maybe twice in a book, but it's unlikely. Most of the time, you're going to hang out in the 5, 6, 7, 8 range. But this is about the perceived emotional temperature. How hard or easy the character thinks the goal they have is going to try and be. The character has to sneak out of a building. Okay, how hard do they think that's going to be? Well, they think they're good at sneaking, and they've seen the security, and it's pretty lax. So they don't think it's going to be very hard. Perceived emotional temperature, PET. We flip that. The other side of that is how hard it actually is. The AET, the actual emotional temperature. How hard or easy will it be once we get beyond the character? Like with the deputy being amazed, it's not really actually hard in the real world for that dude to be amazed. He's kind of an idiot, and it's pretty easy for him to just keep saying, wow, I can't believe the shark attacked. So for him, his PET is a 2 because it's not very hard, and the reality of it is also not very hard because he's just here to be a minor character. Whereas Brody wants to, think it's just a boat attack or whatever. It's no big deal. I'm just going to investigate. So he thinks it's a 4. But it turns out once he sees the shark and sees the girl and sees how bad it is, it's harder than that. It's harder than it turned out to be. So it's a 6. And then the kid continues to not get laid. That's a pretty straightforward goal because his girlfriend got eaten by a shark. Why did my thing? There we go. So here's why this matters. Here's why this is a thing. Because the discrepancy between a character's perception and reality allows us to create tension and allows us to humanize the character or connect with them. Because if I think something's really easy and it turns out to be actually not easy, and I have grossly underestimated something, that changes my behavior, that changes my reaction, that changes my response. Likewise, if the opposite is true, if I think something is going to be just impossible to do, and then I get there and it's really pretty simple, I've overprepared, and some of the anxiety I have evaporates because, it's not so bad. And my ability to relay this information, to communicate this feeling, to get this idea across to the reader gives this scene some extra depth. I didn't make it more complicated. I didn't add extra, ninjas. I didn't add any extra moving bells and whistles. I didn't dump more lore on anybody. I made it about the character. And I questioned how the character would behave based on how hard or easy they think something's going to be. And the better you understand that, the more relatable you can make your character to the reader, which is going to make the story more engaging, which is going to keep the reader around, which is generally just good practice for when you're trying to have them buy the book or keep reading. This is why this matters. It's about connecting to your reader. This is how we do it. So let's look at an example of AET and PET straight from the story. About 2/3 of the way, pre-climax, right before the climax really starts going, the mayor confronts Hooper and Brody that, oh my God, somebody drew a shark fin and a scared googly eye on this big billboard on 4th of July weekend. And the mayor's real pissed about it because there's no such thing. It's not really a problem. It's a shark. Whatever. It's not that big a deal. It's a fish. You do boating things, and the town needs the money. The town needs to stay open. So the mayor's perception of how big a problem the shark is, because that's the point of this scene, the mayor thinks it's like a 2 out of 10. Not the, whatever, it's a shark, fine, they're upset about it, but it's not like serious. The story progresses, the scene progresses. Within like 2 scenes from now, once Brody's son is almost eaten by the shark, and the mayor's right there and sees the whole thing play out, and the mayor realizes, oh my God, I've endangered the whole thing. Like, it's not about just, the town has to be open for 4th of July weekend. Oh my God, I'm at fault here. They can blame me. I have to protect my own ass. So I'm going to start being this stuttering, yammering. I'm going to blame it on the town council. I'll pass the buck. I'll do whatever. But he sees that the shark is an actual problem, and his AET, the actual problem the shark poses to the town and the situation, is a 10, because the shark is eating people around the island. And the discrepancy between the two is developed through the mayor's behavior, through the mayor's dialogue. It tells us what the mayor's going to do in these scenes. When he thinks it's no big deal, the dude is still giving speeches about, amity means friendship, and we're just here for the 4th of July. And then all of a sudden, when the shark eats the kid or nearly eats the kid, he's got his hand in his mouth, and he's constantly, doing like a Cane Mutiny Strawberries thing. That might be too small a reference. But like, he's just sitting there all up in his head, worried and not paying attention. And then he just tells Brody to go with Quint and go kill the shark. And that's the climax of our story. We manipulate and oscillate and toggle between PET and AET to keep the story engaging, so that we don't always have to cliffhanger like children. And we can just constantly keep creating tension to do something in the story. So the discrepancy between AET and PET is creating tension. 99% of it, yes. The other 1% is behavior. If I overestimate or underestimate a thing, how does that change how I act? If I walk in thinking like, there's no test today in class, and then I find out, oh shit, today's a big test, I didn't study, that changes my swagger. That changes how I act. That changes how I feel. And I can communicate that in story. You're looking for tension. You're looking for challenge. You're looking for something for the reader to feel. And we do that by managing the emotional throttling and temperature of our characters. Someone's trying to get in. I see that. Got him. So, yeah, AET is, it's you're welcome. AET and PET, tension. That's the easiest way to think about it, especially when you're just getting started with it. What's going to make this scene more intense? What's going to create more conflict? What's going to create more opportunity? What can we do to put a little bit of pressure on things and get things moving, so that we're not always dependent on suddenly there was a knock at the door, or suddenly this happened and then this happened. We want to break away from some of that ladder forced architecture and get into a more fluid, dynamic story progression. Great question. Love that. On we go. Last part. Every scene has to end. It does. So how does the scene end? Where does it go? How do we go from here to the next thing? And now we're able to see and look at, if we can take all our information for building a scene, we get a scene where Brody and Hooper talk to the mayor. We know it is a dialogue beat and an emotional beat. We know it's a dialogue beat because everybody's talking, but we know it's an emotional beat because at the end of it, Richard Dreyfuss, the actor, high on cocaine, messes up his line and then storms off. Dialogue and emotional. 2 beats, 1 scene. Cool. What characters are in the scene? Brody, Hooper, and the mayor. Where does the scene take place? By the giant defaced billboard. Who has goals? Brody's goal is to convince the mayor that things are bad. He has a rough estimation going into the scene that it's going to be like a 5. It's pretty hard, but not the worst thing in the world. He will discover, though, that it turns out to be a 10 because the mayor is absolutely not having any of it. Hooper, same deal. Convince the mayor that things are bad. The shark needs to be caught. He thinks it's a 5 going in. Turns out to be a 10. It's because Brody and Hooper have the same goal. You can have characters have the same goal. You just have to, in your own notes, keep it clear and just keep track. The mayor, no matter what, the mayor isn't going to admit anything is wrong. Now, that's not difficult for the mayor to do. He's been doing it for the whole movie. So for him, this goal is a 2 because it's pretty much what he's been doing. And he stays doing it, so it stays a 2. But when this is done, the mayor's decision forces Brody to reopen the beaches, which is what prompts the shark to attack again. And if we're in the novel, Hooper gets angry at the mayor, storms back to Brody's house, gets drunk and flirts with Brody's wife, and they hook up for one of the book's few sex scenes. So that's our outro. That's where we go after. Recap. We've reached the end. So what do we need to know? What's the critical stuff? Scenes are made of beats. There are 5 kinds of beats: action, investigation, discovery, emotional, and dialogue. When we are outlining and labeling the scenes, we want to know what scene it is. We want to know who's in it, ideally what number it is. We want to know what everybody's doing in the scene. How hard or easy do they think it's going to be? And how hard or is it really actually going to be in reality? And then how does the scene end? If you can get that stuff down and practice that, no matter what you're writing, no matter what you got going on, totally fine. This will make a massive structural difference to your writing. But how do you craft a good ending and get to the next scene? Well, that's a great question. Part of that's going to be contextual. Part of that's going to be, if we have a scene, if you give me an example, this will be easier. But you take your scene and you figure out, well, does my character accomplish my goal? The character has a goal of they want to have dinner. I'm going to make a scene up. My character wants to eat dinner. As long as they're not interrupted by, alien invasion or whatever, then they will eat dinner. And then when they are done, they will move to their next goal. They'll change scenes and keep going. The good, air quotes, ending comes from the character either being able to accomplish their goal or circumstances in the scene preventing them from accomplishing their goal. And once we sort out whether or not they're going to accomplish it or not, we can then figure out, well, what do they have to do next? If they accomplish their goal, what would they do? If my character's goal was to eat dinner, the next thing I'm going to do is put the dishes in the dishwasher or stack them in the sink. If I'm interrupted because alien invasion or whatever, then I'm not going to eat, and that changes what I'm going to do because now it doesn't make any sense to put my stuff in the sink. The aliens are invading. I'm going to run away. So you want to think about what the character would do if they accomplish their goal or if they can't or don't accomplish their goal. And then figure out that from a decision basis, and that'll tell you how to end the scene and where you're going to go after that. From a broad enough level, when you're mapping this out way in advance, it's very speculative. I know roughly that eventually my character has to do this and then go over here and do that, and then somebody's got to punch the wizard in the nose, and then there's going to be this thing and that thing. Fine, just get it out of your head and get it on the paper. The particulars you can sort out when you get there. I'm guessing the characters need to learn from the discrepancy to be relatable. I don't know what you mean by learn from the discrepancy. They will experience the discrepancy, but it doesn't always have to be a gap. Like sometimes, like with the kid trying to get laid in that early scene, it's a 2 and a 2, or the mayor It's a 2 and a 2. It's the same thing. The thing turns out to be as hard as they expected, and then they just move forward. But often, when we want to challenge our character or give our character a win of some kind, we make it harder or easier relative to what they perceive it to be, and that helps keep the story going. Again, some of this stuff is relatable through example. Like if you give me a scene, here's a thing I'm writing, John, this is what it looks like. So if you have questions about anything, fire away. About anything. If you want to bring me an example, we can totally do it. If you can, do whatever. All right, hang on a minute. There's a big one. Oftentimes I do something similar to this with my outline, although I haven't been numbering scenes. Okay. I just use paragraph breaks. Okay, sure, if that works for you. When writing, I change things up while still trying to hit the scenes I had planned. That's normal. Yeah, it's normal. I mean, the paragraph breaks, that's a you thing. But yeah, the story evolves while you're writing it. That's the thing. It's a good point. Even when you outline it in the most rigorous mode of outlining we can possibly use, the story still evolves while you write it. You can still change your mind. You can still deviate from your outline. And you want to generally, with an outline, leave yourself wiggle room. The outline is, all right, AET and PET in The Martian. Let's do that first. So AET and PET is, so once, his name is Mark, right? Once Mark is marooned, and after he's done having the existential crisis of, oh my God, I've been stuck on Mars, his initial panic is a high AET. Oh my God, I'm stuck on Mars. What am I going to do? But as he starts to science it down and break it down into pieces, I know I have to do this. I know I have to do that. And work his way back to the rover and work his way back to this and that and get the Voyager, get the probe or whatever. Like, the actuality of challenges presents different than his estimation. Sometimes he overestimates. And that's how we had he blows out the tent, or he blows out the airlock at one point, and he gets, knocked out for a while. But sometimes it's easier, where he realizes he can, grow potatoes with his own poop. So it's about constantly looking at the challenges he's trying to accomplish and the things he's trying to do, figuring out his estimation of it, as well as the reality of it once he tries it, and seeing how that shapes and informs characters. I'm reading Dan Brown at the moment, and he has a tendency to use super short chapters, like 300 to 500 words. Do you know why and how this is effective? Yes. Dan Brown uses a short chapter style, a short sectional writing style, because he writes in a very casual tone. So he keeps the story moving. If he manufactures a lot of short chapters, it gives the implication to the reader that the story is moving much faster than it really is, and more is happening than there really is happening. That's why he does that. It's an editorial decision at that level. It's effective because everything is short, so it feels like you're accomplishing a lot more than you are when you read. It's only 5 pages, but really it's 5 chapters. Ooh. And it just feels like more. Good question. What's next? Oh, you're welcome. I'm always glad to do these. Hang on. I use Scrivener. I know you do. I use Scrivener because it lets me label scenes on a corkboard. I know, it's great. I haven't been numbering. It's useful to number. So in physical note cards, numbering is really useful, because numbering, we can then shuffle pieces around like a physical deck of cards, right? So we can take scene 1 and move it near scene 15 without having to open up Scrivener and drag and drop a thing. We can just, on a table right in front of us while we're talking through it, what if we move scene 3 to scene 2? What if we flip this around? That's why we number things. Also, it's just a really good habit to know how many scenes you tend to for what you're writing. More of a film question. Oh, I love film questions. I went to film school. You have a section where a character stares into the distance and there's no dialogue. Is that considered a scene, a beat, or something else? It's a scene and a beat. It is probably, so if we have a character who's just staring off into space, right? Because they're feeling whatever it is they're feeling, hopeless, whatever. Usually it's negative. That's an emotional beat. And it's an emotional beat that fills the entire scene because it's just them staring off into space. So it is both a beat and a scene. Actually, it's two beats. It's a monologue beat where they are thinking things, and in text there would be like paragraphs of narration. They'd be like, we'd be in their heads for an internal. But it's an emotional beat that is itself a whole scene. That's what that is. In web novels, is it better to end an episode at the end of a scene or in the middle of one? It's not uniform, Min. You want to end it where it is most narratively valuable. So for a lot of people, I think there's a drive to end it at the end of a scene and then force a cliffhanger, as if that's going to, guarantee that people come back and like keep reading because we have to tune in same bat time, same bat channel tomorrow. And that's not necessarily always the best because not everything can be made into a cliffhanger. That's weird. But you want to pick the spot to stop where the reader's most encouraged to come back tomorrow and get more. You don't necessarily automatically need a cliffhanger for that. You just need to write it in an engaging way. So you want to stop where it makes the most sense to build the most tension if you're trying to carry tension from one thing to the next. Oftentimes I do something in a paragraph. Yeah, we did that. We covered that. We covered Scrivener. I have a notepad with a feral gremlin collection of sticky notes. Sure. What kind of beat are spicy? Do you mean sex scenes? I'm sorry, I'm an adult. A spicy scene? You mean like a sex scene? A sex scene can be any kind of beat. Here is an example. So a sex scene can be an action beat because it's people fucking. A sex scene can be an emotional beat because people are fucking. A sex scene can be a dialogue beat because people talk while they fuck. A sex scene can be a discovery beat because, we've never had sex before. A sex scene can be an investigation beat. I'm discovering what feels good. Sex scene can be any kind of beat. Yeah, don't call it a spicy scene. Be an adult. It's a sex scene. It can be anything. Any kind of scene can be any beat. What comes down to you choosing. You're not trying to guess the right answer on a test. You are picking and choosing from these tools to shape the best story you want. So if you want to frame, if you're doing a psychological thriller, right? And you've got the woman who's maybe killed her ex-husband, maybe he killed her last husband, falling in love with our detective in the beginning in this new story, then their sex scene is an investigation to see if she really did kill him. I think I'm pretty good on where to cut scenes, but is there a method for determining where to break chapters? Yeah, a chapter is just a container of scenes, right? So a chapter can have any number of scenes in it. If you are done with a scene and the next thing to go forward would be a new scene, you can just make an arbitrary chapter break. Chapters just contain scenes. So if you're done your scene, or if you want to carry over because you're trying to hold tension for one more page or hold tension just a little while longer, just go to the next chapter. Chapters are not fixed things the way scenes are. Scenes are only fixed in the sense that characters have goals and are doing stuff. But you can break chapters wherever. One of the editorial things that comes up for this is you don't, you're drafting, right? Not just you, Rebecca, but anybody, you're drafting. And you write the thing out and you have chapters. You put your chapters where you think the chapters go. Editorially, we strip those out and then we plug in new ones. 9 times out of 10, nothing really changes, but maybe some scenes get shuffled into another chapter just because that's where the tension is, just because that's the exciting part. We're trying to group them all together. If a character is just walking around, their goal would be to just wander around. Yes. Like if they're in the background, like random guy number 7 over there. Or like if you look at the screen with the bird's goal is to just fly around. That, I don't know, bird number 5 over there, just going to fly around. Yeah. The goal doesn't, like an MC lost in thought. So your main character is lost in thought. Then your main character's goal is to wander while thinking things. They're just going to wander. That's their physical action. But, what the point of the scene is to them think through their things. So they're thinking. But yeah, their goal is to wander around while thinking or doing whatever it is they're doing. It isn't just the wandering. Wandering just happens to be what they're doing while they're thinking. But yes, this is all very abstract to you. That's interesting because it's very, very concrete to me. So right now, for instance, you're sitting here, you're listening to this, yeah? Your goal is to understand it. This is a curiosity. Is there a reason why the Blake Snyder beat sheet and these are beats are called the same thing? Because beats are a fundamental unit of storytelling information. Because beats exist in all forms of storytelling, whether that's prose or screenwriting or stagecraft. Because it's a beat. And the Blake Snyder beat sheet tracks beats. Not well, but it does. And these are beats. And they're beats. And they're the same beats over there as they are here. They're the same beats over there in stage plays and film as they are here. They're all beats. It's all the same beats. It's all the same tools. You're just using them in prose. They are not different. They are expressed differently to its audience. Movies are visual. Books are imaginative. That kind of thing. No, the beat sheet is just, well, in screenwriting, beat and scene are used often synonymously, interchangeably. They shouldn't be, but it's a lazy shorthand. But beats are just pieces of story. Because you can have a dialogue beat that is a whole talking scene, and that's how you fall into that hole. But yeah, beats are just pieces of story. And you can get real fussy about like, oh, it's the inciting incident and the declining action. First of all, no one's going to give a shit. And second of all, those are just different ways of framing the same information. But none of that stuff is precious. Like none of that stuff is carved in stone. You just got to tell your story. I'm just trying to give you tools to do it. I feel like I skipped a question. Did I skip a question in chat? Let's scroll up for a minute and take a look. Well, we were talking about how abstract it is. It's a matter of making a decision, because writing is the act of making decisions, right? Like that's how writing happens. You want to just think from decision to decision, from character action to character action to character reaction, and so on. How many discovery beats in a row is too many? Oof. All right, so if we're just going discovery to discovery to discovery, it's not going to be many because you're eventually going to need a payoff. You're eventually going to need to do something with the stakes you're raising or the tension you're building. So the answer is going to be not many. Also, if you stack too many together, the newly gained information will wash each other out. Like if you give me 2 important things, or not 2, we'll use a bigger number. If you use 4 important things, then the most recent one, the 4th one, is going to overshadow the first one because you just keep throwing information at me. So the answer to how many discoveries is too many, it's smaller than you think. What's the best and easiest way to manage beats for pacing? Well, pacing. Okay, so pacing is the distribution of time over story. I don't mean that like internal timeline. I mean like the reader sitting down and feeling engaged by the story. So understanding that there's going to be a flow from beat to beat, that, like there's a thing called the action. We didn't cover this, but you get, when you find patterns of beats, those are called economies, like an action economy or a clue economy. And those progressions of beats can, help move the story forward. For instance, the easiest one to understand is a character makes a decision. A character goes and investigates and looks for a clue. The character discovers a clue, but that leads to an action scene because now they have to deal with the consequences of finding the clue. That's a very basic clue economy that starts with an emotional beat because they had a feeling, to either a discovery or an investigation beat. The order in there is pretty flexible depending on how you want to write it, but they're doing something about it. So we're going emotion to investigation. And in the course of investigation, then they're either finding out through the investigation beat, or they're not finding through direct investigation. They just stumble across it. That's the discovery beat. But because we've now got information, we have to have consequences. So we then go from an investigation or discovery beat into an action beat. So if I'm searching for the murderer in my small town and I discover muddy footprints outside a window and I go peeping in that window, the big giant thug guy who owns the house, who sees me peeping in his window, doesn't realize I'm looking for clues and goes and kicks the shit out of me. That's the action beat. Pacing will manage itself to some degree when you organize your story in a way where the beats make natural progressive sense, where you don't stack 5 bajillion investigation beats back to back to back, because you've got to give the reader context and you got to give the reader time to lock those thoughts in. So the easiest way to manage pacing is to map your scenes out. Figure out, okay, what has to happen in my story? This to this to this to this. Hang on, there's a big giant thing. I once read a book that you didn't finish because it was all action and stuff happening. Everybody's in danger and there's no downtime. Yeah. Too much action. They couldn't get all their stuff done. Yes. So when you run into a situation where a lot of stuff is happening, and from a writer perspective, you're thinking, oh, this is great. It's very exciting. Look at all the stuff everybody's doing. You need to stop that. Like, you need to stop and think, well, the reader is reading this. I have to give my reader a chance to catch their breath. I can't keep delaying and kicking the can down the road. And I can't keep raising the stakes. And I can't keep just action upon action upon action, because eventually it just gets silly. So you want to frame it and slow it down and control it, and give the reader a chance to catch their breath, and give the reader a chance to sort of contextualize what's been happening. Okay, we have a downtime. Big exhale, on we go. Are beats another way to distinguish between scene and sequel? No. I mean, you could, if you really wanted to. It's not normally done that way, but yeah, I guess you could. But generally, scene and sequel is a limited way of framing a story. It creates too many short-term patterns over and over. Whereas, because you have 5 basic beats and then about 70 other 5 different kinds, you get a chance of really creating a more lengthy melodic structure. But scene and sequel is not bad. It's just small. It's a visual gesture I'm making on an audio recording. Scene and sequel is okay. I just like beats better. I think they're more useful. I think they've got a greater utility. I think they're more flexible. I think they work better for what more people are trying to do. And they feel, on some level, more understandable. You don't have to force the parallelism in sequel. I have to make these pieces tie together. How long should I cook a ham in the oven? How big is the ham pizza? Big-ish. You want an internal temperature, I believe, around 138 Fahrenheit. So go get a thermometer and do that. But yeah, it's usually by the pound. Go look at the package. Go look at the label on the thing. I was not expecting a ham question. Yeah, you want to go by pound. What's next? I don't have another. We've covered character. We could do world building next time. But I've been told that web novel people have no problem with world building, which I object to. I think they have a problem with world building. All right, hang on a minute. Yes, that's exactly the problem, Hugh. They get stuck on way too much world building because it's exciting for you, and it's the worst writing habit possible. Food truck, yay, always, yeah, sure. What is supposed to be in a story Bible, and is there a way it should be constructed? It doesn't have a set look, right? But here's what it should have: list of characters, usually in order, primaries, secondaries, and tags, etc. List of locations, like scene locations. This house, that house. It doesn't have to be room by room. It can be. It doesn't need to be. But, just a list of major locations. Scene breakdown, like scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, scene 4, scene 5, scene 90, scene whatever. Then a general map of the arcs, character arc, plot arc, subplots. Anything beyond that is going to deal with those pieces, like the story Bible I give people is a grid that allows you to map when in a chapter or when in a book a thing like pops up, so you can cross-reference and go, scene 22 is where I'm supposed to have a part of the character arc, so I better fix that. Like that's a deep level question. Like that's swimming waters. By and large, though, you'd be fine with character name, arcs, locations, and basic plot beats. Just what's the plot in order? This piece, this piece, this piece, this piece. You can do it in a legal pad. You can do it in a Word doc. Doesn't matter. Could you have that? Yeah, I can. Yeah, that's no problem. That's easy to do. I can get that when I'm done here. Yeah, no problem. I can do world building. World building is you're gonna finally get me to say something short, because world building is not, compared to plot and character, world building is not that long a topic. There's just like 2 practices and a couple exercises. Maybe 3 practices if we stretch it a little. But yeah, it'll be short. And exercises. And I have to do more. If you're in the Discord, there's a whole growing pile of exercises and stuff. Because you should be, if you're going to do something like that, you should do exercises as opposed to prompts. What's next? You're welcome. I started them because Hugh had mentioned there were some students in school who wanted some writing stuff. And at that level, there's not a lot of great writing stuff. So I just sat down and was like, if I was in high school, if I was in middle school, what would I want to read? What would I want to be told to write better? So I just mapped out some shit. All right. Anything else? Are we done? Is that good? Do we have more to say and do? I do not mind answering more questions. We have time. You're good. All right. I'm glad it was helpful. Thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely. So the next one we'll do probably after the holidays is world building. I'm glad you took notes. That's awesome. I am gonna stop all the recordings and stuff but I'll hang out here and we'll take some notes and answer some questions. But I gotta wrap this thing up because I want to put it on YouTube. So stay here, everybody. But thanks so much for checking this out, and I'll talk to you soon.